Welcome to the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs, and it's an honor to have with us Mr. Rock and Roll. He was on K-Earth 101 for 29 years, and he's the proprietor and founder of the Legends of Rock and Roll Concerts. Brian Beirne is with us. And I remember back when I was a teenager, my dad used to sell records at the Pasadena City College flea market. And there was a big record show section there. And he had many, many customers. And one of those customers was Brian. In fact, my dad sometimes had stuff on consignment. And Brian, tell us about yourself growing up and how you first started collecting records.
After the war, my folks only had a handful of records, and I kept playing them over and over when I was a little kid. I think I was 4, and one of the records was Winter Wonderland with Guy Lombardo and the Andrews Sisters, and it was July at about 80 degrees, and I was on about my 6th or 7th play of it. And my dad said, I think we need to get our son some more records. So he couldn't take it anymore. I started taking my little radio flyer wagon around the neighborhood, asking people for any old records they wanted to get rid of, and started a lifelong obsession collecting records.
And do you still have that Guy Lombardo 45 or record?
I certainly do.
That's great.
Certainly do. Actually, I have the 78, and it was a 78. I still have it.
Wow. And most players today can't even do the 78 format, can they?
No. But, that's what we had in those days prior to 45s and LPs. So, anyway.
That's great. And how did you, when rock and roll first broke out, what were your thoughts on it?
Oh, I loved it. We traveled a lot, my folks and I, so I would listen to the radio, and we would travel back and forth from the Bay Area where we lived down to Los Angeles because my dad had some stuff to do down here. And so as a little kid, I'm 5, 6 years old, and I'm listening to the rhythm and blues stations here in L.A. and that I couldn't get when I go back up to the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
So I was fascinated by the L.A. sound, all the R&B, and then when rock and roll hit, I was gone. I picked up I played piano, but I picked up a guitar because once Elvis hit, everybody wanted to be like Elvis, and so I started playing the guitar. But then just before my folks split, when I was 10, my dad took me into a radio station because I was just so obsessed with music, and I went in one afternoon and I watched this guy, and I thought, God, this is great. He's queuing up the records. He gets to talk about them. And then he said the magic words. He said, kid, see this box under the console? He said, when they're off the playlist, you can take the records home free. I said, oh, yeah, this is a business for me.
Do you remember the DJ's name by chance?
No, I sure don't. I don't. It was a small little station up in the Bay Area, and that I listened to, and that started the whole thing. And so when after my folks split and my mother and I moved up to Oregon, I started having the bus let me out in town a couple days of the week, and I started hanging around the local radio station, and the guys were, helpful. It showed me how to cue the records up, and I just became more and more fascinated with the whole concept of it all.
Now, was this up in the Portland area, or what part of Oregon?
This was in Salem.
Oh, okay. Because I just interviewed a couple weeks ago former Nutty Wonderful Kissin' DJ, world-famous Tom Murphy, who was up there for
I know Tom. Yeah.
Many years, and he had some great stories up there. So I'm not sure if 91 came into Salem because those AM signals oftentimes could carry pretty well depending on the size of the frequency and the power in those transmitters. But do you remember any of the DJs that mentored you, what their names were, and anything that they instilled in you that you have taken away till this day?
I'm trying to think back. Of course, I listened to Kissin' in those days, and I actually almost went to work at Kissin' in Portland a couple times.
Wow.
No, there was a local DJ in Salem. Gosh, I can't think of his name. That I think he did upstairs, and Jim Hunter, and then there was another fellow that did afternoons that actually became a big voiceover guy in L.A. years ago. I can't think of his name at the moment, but he was the one that really kind of helped me in the afternoons because he was doing afternoons, and I'd go in and watch him cue up the records. He kind of taught me the timing of it all. So
that's great. Now, how did you get your first job in radio?
Well, actually, that was pretty interesting because it was kind of by accident. The station there in Salem, they used to once a month do a Saturday night sock hop, and they'd broadcast it live from the local YWCA. And I was too shy to go down there and dance for the girls and stuff, 13 years old and pimples, and I just wanted to hang out with the jock and, hand him the records and kind of help him out. So one night, he's about a half hour into the show, and he said, "I'm sick. I'm going to go home." He says, "You take it." I said, "What do you mean take it?" He said, "You know how to run the show." I said, "I'm 13 years old." He says, "You can finish it." So the program director calls. He said, "What are you doing on the air?" I said, "Larry just left, and I'm just running the show." So they gave me a little Saturday night show for a while until my mother put a nix on it because she thought I was going to meet girls, and I'm thinking, yes, this is great. I'm 13 years old and I'm on the radio, and now maybe girls will pay attention to me, pimples and all. So anyway, I went back to work at that station. I guess 5 years later.
Which station was that?
That was KBZY.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But then I went to, as soon as I graduated from high school at 17, and I went directly to college at the University of Oregon. And within a couple of weeks, I had a job. I went to work at the local college station, and the program director there actually gave me great advice. He said, "Be yourself," and he said, "Come up with something that nobody else is doing." And so I had a show there. I was doing jazz. I was the bearded one with jazz on a Saturday night. And then there was an opening at one of the regular stations, an AM station, doing news. And so I became the morning news man before I went to school during the day. And then I was doing engineering and stuff on the weekends for the station. And then I went to work at another station under a different name at the same time. So I was working at a couple of stations at the same time, and went to school so I could sleep in class. This is basically what I wound up doing.
What was your pseudonym on the other station?
Oh, gosh, I can't even remember what it was. But and they didn't care whether or not I was, Brian Beirne doing news at that point. And so anyway, I worked there for a couple of years in college, and then there was that opening back at KBZY in Salem, and so I quit college, and because there were very few times that there was ever an opening at KBZY. Most of those guys had stayed there for years. And so I headed to Salem and was there for a couple of years. Started doing nights and then wound up doing afternoon drive. That's
great. And I remember seeing your autobiography. You did everything from news, traffic, on air to feeding the cows.
Yes. Ray Willis was the guy that did afternoons at KBZY, who was kind of my mentor, I guess.
Oh, cool.
And Yeah, I went to I went to work and forgot that little portion of it at this small station called Crow, which was really nothing to crow about. But I think I had more cows listening to me than I did actual people. Because when I do a contest, the only person that would call in was my grandmother. So that was part of my job, was to mow the lawn on Saturdays and feed the cows on the back 40. The guy that owned the station had cows, and the cows would inevitably, it was a really small station, probably about as big as your apartment, and so you there was no air conditioning. You'd have to open the front door and the back door in order to get some breeze through there, and the cows would inevitably just wander in. And if I'm in the middle of a 10-minute newscast, they're nudging my back, going, So, and I could never get the darn cows out of there. And the guy that followed me, I said, Bob, what's the trick to get the cows out? He said, you just got to talk to them. I said, I talk to them all the time, but I can't get them to leave. So, he'd turn around and call their names or something, and the cows would just walk out the door, but it never worked for me.
I love it.
But I learned a lot there. I mean, I learned how to actually do a lot more things as far as writing copy and doing news, and just kind of honing my skills, if you will, for a while. And
and KBZY was a CHR, like a top 40 format, more middle of the road.
Yeah, that was a top 40 format. Crow was what we called in those days chicken rock, where you played anything you wanted. It was just go to the library and play it, whether it was new or old, and it was it's a weird format, actually. But there were a few chicken rock stations around the country like that.
Oh yeah. I remember you also eventually went. You said you were on 12 different radio stations, from KBZY to K-Earth 101. What other markets did you get to be a DJ in?
Well, I left KBZY. I went to Seattle for a short stint, and then I went to Sacramento. The one thing that I did learn early on was to be able to do more than one thing in this business, which kept me always working. If there wasn't a spot as a jock, I would just go into news and do news for a while, and then go back into being a DJ. So I went to Sacramento as a news director, and went to KYA in San Francisco. I went back to Sacramento, and I worked actually Sacramento 3 times.
Wow. Was it all three, the same station each time, or 3 different stations?
There was actually, I worked 2 different stations, and the 3rd time that I went back there, it was the same station, but they had changed the call letters. And then I was off to, in this business, as the old radio commercial went, see the USA in your Chevrolet, which is kind of what I did. I went to Cleveland, and so I left Sacramento in 1971 in January. It was 80 degrees, and I got off the plane in Cleveland. It was 22 in a snowstorm.
Oh, man.
And I said, did I make a good career move here? I didn't even have a coat.
Oh, goodness.
It was good. The old joke, I spent 3 years in Cleveland one night, but it was good career-wise then. I started in news. I became the news director in, I don't know, the first month or two. And then I was also became a television weatherman.
Oh, wow.
For the ABC network there. And, working 7 days a week. And so I just didn't sleep a lot. But it was good. And I had a wonderful time there, despite the weather and all. It was good career-wise at the time.
What was the radio station in Cleveland, by the way?
That was WGAR,
Okay.
which was a 50,000-watter. We got into 8 states, as I recall. And I worked with the legendary Don Imus. Don and I had worked in Cleveland together. Sacramento together. And then we went to Cleveland. Actually, our general manager and our program director, all of us went to. We packed up our stuff and went from Sacramento to Cleveland.
Wow. Now, over the years, how much contact did you have with Imus after that?
You know, Don and I were very close when we were in Cleveland. We had a television show too for a while, and we did a Friday night movie wraparound stuff together, which was very fun. And then we kept in touch for a little while. I guess probably a dozen years or so, and then kind of just lost track of one another. I knew where Don was, but we didn't keep in touch until actually shortly before his passing, when we spoke. And but he was quite a part of my career for a while.
Well, I'm glad you got to talk to him before he passed away, because it's been about 3 or 4 years now. And I remember he and Robert W. Morgan, who you eventually worked with at KRF 101, did some stuff together as well. I remember Morgan's retirement party. I heard the air check of that KRF put out. And frankly, I thought the funniest thing in the whole air check was when Imus was having Morgan visit him, and Morgan steals all the microphones except for the newsman's microphone. So and Imus is like, well, we're broadcasting right now from the newsroom here because Robert W. Morgan just stole all the microphones. And security. This is Don Imus. Yeah, Robert W. Morgan just left the building. Send somebody to arrest him. He just stole our microphones.
They had fun. So, and Robert was quite a card.
I'll bet. This is the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs. We're speaking with Brian Beirne, Mr. Rock and Roll, and next time we'll find out some of the songs he was the first to break over the radio.